How's it going? I'm doing good. I'm excited to read today. Um, I need I need to figure out. Hello. I need to figure out how to get it so that I can't hear myself without muting my mic, because that would make reading much easier. Did nope. Hmm. How are you guys doing? Why do I hear myself? I'm really quiet. Really? Hmm. Is that better? Okay. Hmm. That's interesting. But monitor only. Okay. How's that? Okay. Let's. Ooh, you can probably hear my typing. Hello. Sorry, we're just trying to get some settings right. Um, and then we'll get started. Damn. Okay. Hmm. Okay. I was able to lower my own volume a little bit, so that makes it a little better. Um, but for next time, I'll definitely look up how to get rid of the issue that I'm dealing with right now. But for now, hello, welcome to my library reading session. Um, Today we're going to be reading a couple of poems, and then we can move on to picking one of the larger books or poems that I have that we can make like a series out of. Okay. But I also want to thank hi Lumi Sky. Welcome to the stream. I want to thank um, Lixa EXC for the follow, and also Be Merry VT for the follow. So thank you very much. That's much appreciated. Okay. Hello. Uh, Sorry, I'm gonna butcher your name. Limus Foley. How's it going? Okay. So, one of my uh, favorite areas of literature that I feel like doesn't get enough um, found out you are by sheer coincidence. Oh, hey. Awesome. Yeah. Nice to meet you, Anxiety Princess. Always nice to meet uh, another Fae and Librarian. Um, but like I said, one of the areas of literature that I feel like doesn't get enough attention. Um, okay, thanks. I'm glad I got it right at least. Um, one of the one of my favorite um, areas of literature that doesn't get enough attention is Old English poetry, uh, the the Anglo-Saxon poetry. So I want to introduce you to a poem or two that I've really enjoyed, at least in my studies in college. Um, awesome, yeah. Uh, well, I'm glad you're here, Lemmy. Um, uh, and so when we're talking about Old English, a lot of people misunderstand what. Thank you for the follow, Anxiety Princess. Thank you very much. Uh, when we're talking about Old English, we a lot of people mistake it as thinking that we're talking about like Shakespeare, um, because Shakespeare has a very like old timey kind of feel, but Shakespeare is actually technically modern English. Like he is writing and speaking in the same language structurally as we do. Um, he has the same grammar. He just doesn't use the same words all the time that that we do in the modern English, like in contemporary modern English. Um, and then you have what's known as Middle English, that's around the 15th century all the way back to like the 10th or 11th century. Um, and that's like where you get the Canterbury Tales, so Chaucer. Um, and there's it's like Middle English is readable for the most part, compared to modern English. But when you get to Old English is a completely different language. There is all sorts of differences. You still get like Nordic runes in the language in Old English. It's wild. It's really crazy, and I love it so much. Uh, so like how there's like the P that makes the th sound in Thor. That is a letter in Old English, which is it's wild. Um, um, so today I want to start with a poem that I really love called "The Wanderer," um, and it's basically about this guy who has been exiled from his clan because he's done some terrible things. And one of the really funny things about this poem is that a little guy you may have heard of, a little professor at Oxford, that you may have heard of, J.R.R. Tolkien, did the translation of this poem. So that's really cool to me. Not, he did a translation of like Beowulf and the death of Arthur, King Arthur, but he also did The Wanderer. So let's begin. The Wanderer. And yeah, Beowulf is tough. A lot of Old English stuff is tough, but I love it all the same. The Wanderer. How often the lone dweller anticipates some sign, this measurer's mercy must mine carrying along the ocean's windings, stirring rime-chilled seas, hands as oars, many long whiles, treading the tracks of exile, the way of the world, an open book always. So spoke the earth stepper, a memorial of miseries, slaughter of the wrathful, crumbling of kinsmen. Often every daybreak, alone I must bewail my cares. There's now no one living, to whom I dare mumble my mind's understanding. I know as truth that it seems suitable for anyone to blind fast their spirit's closet. Hold onto the hordes, think whatever. Can a weary mind weather the storm? I think not. Can a rolling heart set itself free? A roiling heart set itself free? I don't think so. So often those hustling for the wind must clamp down grim mindings in their coffer, just as I ought fetter my inborn conceit, often wounded, wanting where I know. Wanting where I know, kindred pulled away. How many winters now? I shrouded my giver in dark earth, and wended away worrisome weather watching the wrathful waves. Haul wretched, seeking a center, far or near, where they may yet be found. Hold on just a second. I gotta get a drink of water. This old English stuff, it's hard to get the rhythm. I'm glad. I'm glad that we'll be different. Seeking a center, far or near, where they might be found, in some mead hall, who knows of my kin, willing to adopt a friendless me, though they may be joyful enough. So basically, we're given this this picture of this character who has been forced. Oh, okay. Have a good one, Anxiety Princess, and thanks again for the follow. We get this picture of this character, this warrior from Anglo-Saxon England, really even before it can really be called England, and he has been forced to into exile. We don't know yet really why, but he's obviously very much he misses his family. He misses everything that he once had and he cannot have again. And he's praying to God, the measurer, earth stepper. There's kind of this mixing of Christian iconography and language with the more Old English versions of like Odin, or Wotan, however they would have pronounced it. And so now he's set wandering, and he's trying to find a new home, but he doesn't know if he can right now, because who would take in someone like him? Okay. The well-traveled know how slicing sorrow can be by one's side. Short a struggle friend, however dear. The ways of wandering wind him round, not even a wire wound of gold, a frigid fastness. Hardly any fruits of the fold. This one lists the hall lads, so his friends, swilling rings, giver drenched in youngsome days, in both furnishing and feasting, joys all flown, vanished all away. Therefore one knows who long forgoes the friendly words of their first, when sleep and sorrow stand together, clutching at the crestfallen alone. Somehow seems that somewhere inside, this one enwraps his lord and kisses his lord, and laps both hands and head on his knee. When once upon a year, blurry in time now, one thrived by the throne, too soon arousing, a friendless, singular, seeing all around a foulness of waves, seabirds bathing, fanning their feathers, ice and snow hurtling, heaved up with hail. So heavy and heavier the heart, the hurt in the heart, harrowing for the loss, sorrow made new, whenever recalling pervades the mind, greeting kindred joyfully, drinking in the look of them, fallible and fathoming. They always swim away. Gulls ghost call. I don't know their tongue too well. Much of their comfort weird, worrying made new to that one who must send more and more every day. A bleary soul black across the binding of waves. So now he's at a new location. He's at a new city or a new town, but their ways are foreign to him, and he doesn't know if he can fit in with them because his old way is what he's used to, obviously. Therefore, I cannot wander across this world. Why my mind does not muster in the murk, when I ponder pervading all the lives of humans, how suddenly they abandon their halls, proud princes and young, right here in the middle it fumbles and falls every day. No one can be wise before earning their lot of winters in this world. The wise one, they stay patient, not too hard-heated, not so hasty to harp, not too weak-armed, nor too wan-headed, nor too fearful, nor too fey, nor too felching, and never tripping the tongue too much before it trips them. That one binds their moment to make brag, until the inner fire seizes its moment clearly, to where their secret self fears them. Whose wise must foreken how ghostly it has been, when the world and its things stand wasted, like you find here and there in this middle space now. Their walls totter, wailed around by winds, gnashed by frost, the buildings are snow-lapped, the wine halls moulder, their wielder lies, wasted clean of joys, his peerage all perished, proud by the wall. War ravaged, a bunch ferried along the fourth way. Others a raptor ravished, over lofty seas. This one, the hoary wolf, broke in its banes. The last a brother, gravelled in the ground, tears a war mask. That's the way it goes. The Shaper, God mills Middle Earth to waste, until they stand empty. The giants work, and ancient drained of the dreams and joys of its dwellers. Then one wisely regards this wallstead, deliberates a darkened existence, aged in spirit, often remembering from afar many war slaughterings, and speaks these words. Where has the horse gone? Where are my kindred? Where is the giver of treasure? Where are the benches to bear us? Joys of the hall to bring us together. No more the bright goblet. All gone the mailed warrior. Lost for good, the pride of princes. How the space of years has spread, growing gloomy beneath the night helm, as if it ever was. Tracks of the beloved multitude, all that remains, walls, wondrous tale, tall. Serpents seething, thanes stolen, pillaged by ashen foes, gear glutting for slaughter. We know this world's way, and the storms still batter these stony cliffs. The tumbling snows stumble up the earth, the clash of winter, when darkness descends, night shadows benighten. Sent down from the north, raw showers of ice. Who doesn't hate humanity? All shot through in misery in earthly realms. Fortune's turns the world under sky. Here the cash was alone, your friends were alone. Anyone at all alone, your family only ever alone. And this whole foundation of the earth wastes away. So says the wise one, you don't hear him at all. Sitting apart, reading their own runes. It's better to clutch at your counsel. You ought never manifest your miseries, not too quickly, wear they well, unless the balm is clear beforehand. Keep whittling at your courage. It will be well for those who seek the favor. The comfort from our Father in heaven, where a battlement bulwarks us all. That's the end of the poem, and I really love I love how ancient it sounds. I think you can really tell a lot about the culture of the writer or the speaker, more likely, the speaker of this poem. He's obviously distraught about the way his life is going, to say the least. And he basically has been forced out of his home because he was the last survivor of a battle that no one should have survived. So he comes back to his people, and they're like, "Well, what happened? Why are you still alive?" And they kind of figure out that he may have it's implied that he may have ran or didn't have the courage to fight. And of course, that in a warrior culture, that is the greatest sin that a warrior could possibly commit, or one of them anyway. And so basically, they cast him out, and he has to wander the earth, looking for a new home from and he has to try to find a place that hasn't heard of him, that hasn't, or that won't cast him out when they find out, because word travels. And I think it's a really cool poem. Thank you for the follow, Jotun Red Wolf. Hold on just a second. Okay. So what kind of poetry do you guys like? What are your favorite poems, if you have any? Or you can tell me why you think that poetry is awful. I guess I don't mind. I will disagree with you if you do. Um, but everyone's entitled to their opinion. Poe is really good. Yes. Poe is definitely one of the greats. I don't have, I don't, I don't have any physical copies of Poe, unfortunately. Um, I definitely need to get some. Most of the poetry that I read, at least in school, came from like those really big, um, like Norton anthology, uh, poem, like Norton's Anthology of American Poetry or British Poetry or something like that. Um, and I think that that's pretty common in at least in American schools. I don't know about anywhere else. Um, oh, there's a note here on line 92 of The Wanderer. It says in J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, in Chapter 6 of The Two Towers, Aragorn sings a song of Rohan, itself a version of Anglo-Saxon England, beginning where now the horse and the rider. Where is the horn that was blowing? The song clearly comes from this section of The Wanderer, which makes sense because Tolkien did a translation of The Wanderer. Um, so yeah, that's really cool. Um, what's your favorite poem? I think mine's probably the Raven, but that's um, that's just me. Yeah, that's a really good short story. Hey, yeah, the Barnes and Noble edition of a collection of Poe's work. Yeah, yeah, those editions are actually really pretty. It's you wouldn't expect that like just a regular like Barnes and Noble edition of a book would be pretty, but they actually like go all out on those classics. It's really cool. Um, let's see. What else can we read? 18. Most of my most of my studying in poetry came from the 18th century, so most of what I know comes from the 18th century. So like the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, um, the Tiger by William Blake. Uh, I read the Dunciad by Alexander Pope, but that's a really just difficult poem. Um, yeah, Rime of the Ancient Mariner is a really great poem. Um, it's not actually well, yeah, it is kind of long, but we can read it. Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Let's go. Okay. Um, so the Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Part 1. It is an ancient mariner, and he stoppeth one of three. By thy long grey beard and glittering eye, now wherefore stoppest thou me? The bridegroom's doors are open wide, and I am next of kin. The guests are met, the feast is set, mayst hear the merry din. He holds him with his skinny hand. There was a ship, quoth he. Hold off, unhand me, greybeard loon. Off soon's his hand dropped he. He holds him with his glittering eye. The wedding guest stood still, and listens like a 3 years child. The mariner hath his will. The wedding guest sat on a stone. He cannot choose but hear. And thus spake on that ancient man, the bright-eyed mariner. The ship was cheered, the harbor cleared. Merrily did we drop below the kirk, below the hill, below the lighthouse top. The sun came up upon the left. Out of the sea came he, and he shone bright, and on the right went down into the sea. Higher and higher every day, till over the mast at noon. The wedding guest here beat his breast, for he heard the loud bassoon. The bride hath paced into the hall, red as a rose is she, nodding their heads before her goes the merry minstrelsy. The wedding guest he beat his breast, yet he cannot choose but hear. And thus spake on that ancient man, the bright-eyed mariner. And now the storm blast came, and he was tyrannous and strong. He struck with his overtaking wings, and chased us south along. With sloping masts and dipping prow, as who pursued, with yell and blow, still treads the shadow of his foe, and forward bends his head. The ship drove fast, loud roared the blast, and southward we fled. And now there came both mist and snow, and it grew wondrous cold, and ice mast high came floating by, as green as emerald. And through the drifts the snowy cliffs did send a dismal sheen, nor shapes of men nor beasts we ken, the ice was all between. The ice was here, the ice was there, the ice was all around. It cracked and growled, and roared and howled, like the noises in a swound. At length did cross an albatross. Thorough the fog it came, as if it had been a Christian soul, we hailed it in God's name. It ate the food we ne'er had eat, and round it flew. The ice did split with a thunder fit. The helmsman steered us through. And a good south wind sprung up behind. The albatross did follow. And every day for food or play came to the mariner's hollow. In mist or cloud, or on mast or shroud, it perched for vespers 9, whiles all night, through fog smoke white, glimmered the white moonshine. God save thee, ancient mariner, from the friends that plague thee thus. Why lookest thou so? With my crossbow I shot the albatross. Poor albatross. What did it do? This is a bird. Poor burb. Part 2. The sun now rose upon the right. Out of the sea came he, still hid in mist, on the left, went down into the sea. And the good south wind still blew behind, but no sweet bird did follow, nor any day for food or play came to the mariner's hollow. And I had done a hellish thing, and it would work 'em woe. For all averred, I had killed the bird that made the breeze to blow. Ah, wretch, said they, the bird to slay that made the breeze to blow. Nor dim nor red, like God's own head, the glorious sun abrist. And then all averred, I had killed the bird that brought the fog and mist. 'Twas right, said they, such birds to slay that bring the fog and mist. The fair breeze blew, the white foam flew, the furrow followed free. We were the first that ever burst into the silent sea. Down dropped the breeze, the sails dropped down. 'Twas sad as sad could be, and we did speak only to break the silence of the sea. All in a hot and copper sky, the bloody sun at noon right up above the mast did stand, no bigger than the moon. Day after day, we stuck, nor breathe, nor motion, as idle as a painted ship upon a painted ocean. Water, water everywhere, and all the boards did shrink. Water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. The very deep did rot, O Christ, that ever this should be. Yea, slimy things did crawl with legs upon the slimy sea. About, in reel and rout, the death fires danced at night. The water, like a witch's oils, burnt green and blue and white. And some in dreams assured were of the spirit that plagued us so. 9 fathom deep he had followed us from the land of mist and snow. And every tongue through utter drought was withered at the root. We could not speak, nor more if than if we could not speak no more than if we had been choked with soot. Ah, well a day, what evil looks had I from old and young, instead of the cross, the albatross about my neck was hung. Part 3. There passed a weary time, each throat was parched, and glazed each eye. A weary time, how glazed each weary eye. When looking westward I beheld a something in the sky. At first it seemed a little speck, and then it seemed a mist. It moved and moved, and took at last a certain shape I wist. A speck, a mist, a shape I wist, and still it neared and neared. As if it dodged a water sprite, it plunged and tacked and veered. With throats unslaked, with black lips baked, we could nor laugh nor wail. Through utter drought all dumb we stood. I bit my arm, I sucked the blood. I cried, "A sail, a sail!" With throats unslaked, with black lips baked, agape, they heard me call, "Gramercy!" They for joy did grin, and all at once their breath drew in, as they were drinking all. "See, see!" I cried, "she tacks no more, hither to work us weal. Without a breeze, without a tide, she steadies with upright keel." The western wave was all aflame. The day was well nigh done. Almost upon the western wave rested the broad, bright sun, when that strange shape drove suddenly betwixt us and the sun. And straight the sun flecked with bars, heaven's mother sent us grace, as if through a dungeon grate he peered with broad and burning face. Alas, thought I, and my heart beat loud, how fast she nears and nears. Are those her sails that glance in the sun, like restless gossamers? I guess it's supposed to be gossameres, based on the rhyme. But, yeah. Are those her ribs, through which the sun did peer, as through a grate? And is that woman all her crew? Is that a death? And are there two? Is death that woman's mate? Her lips were red, her looks were free. Her locks were yellow as gold, her skin was as white as leprosy. The nightmare life and death was she, who thicks men's blood with cold. The naked hulk as alongside came, and the twain were casting dice. "The game is done, I've won," quoth she, and whistles thrice. The sun's rim dips, the stars rush out. With at one stride comes the dark. With far whisper over the sea, off shot the spectred bark. We listened and looked sideways up, fear at my heart as at a cup. My lifeblood seemed to sip. The stars were dim and thick at the night. The steersman's face by his lamp gleamed white. From the sails the dew did drip, till clomb above the eastern bar the horned moon with one bright star within the nether tip. One after one, by the star-dogged moon, too quick for groan or sigh, each turned his face with a ghastly pang, and cursed me with his eye. 4 times 50 living men, and I heard nor sigh or groan. With heavy thump, a lifeless lump, they dropped down one by one. The souls did from their bodies fly. They fled to bliss or woe, and every soul it passed me by, like the whiz of my crossbow. Part 4. I fear thee, ancient mariner, I fear thy skinny hand, and thou art long and lank and brown as is the ribbed sea sand. I fear thee, and thy glittering eye, and thy skinny hand so brown. Fear not, thou wedding guest, this body dropped not down. Alone, alone, all alone, alone on a wide, wide sea. And never a saint took pity on my soul in agony. The many men so beautiful, and they all dead did lie, and 1,000 slimy things lived on, and so did I. I looked upon the rotting sea, and drew my eyes away. I looked upon the rotting deck, and there the dead men lay. I looked to heaven, and tried to pray, but or ever a prayer had gust. A wicked whisper came and made my heart as dry as dust. I closed my lids and kept them close, and the balls like pulses beat, for the sky and the sea, and the sky and the sea and the sky, lay dead like a load on my weary eye, and the dead were at my feet. The cold sweat melted from their limbs, nor rot nor reek did they. The look with which they looked on me had never passed away. An orphan's curse would drag to hell a spirit from on high, but oh, more horrible than that is the curse in a dead man's eye. 7 days, 7 nights I saw that curse, and yet I could not die. The moving moon went up the sky, and nowhere did abide. Softly she was going up, and a star or two beside. Her beams bemocked the sultry main, like April hoar-frost spread. But where the ship's huge shadow lay, the charmed water burnt away. The charmed water burnt away a still and awful red. Beyond the shadow of the ship, I watched the water snakes. They moved in tracks of shining white, and when they reared, the elfish light fell off in hoary flakes. Within the shadow of the ship, I watched their rich attire, blue glossy green, and velvet black. They coiled and swam, and every track was a flash of golden fire. O happy living things, no tongue their beauty might declare. A spring of love gushed from my heart, and I blessed them unaware. Sure, my kind saint took pity on me, and I blessed them unaware. The self-same moment I could pray, and from my neck so free, the albatross fell off and sank like lead into the sea. Part 5. O sleep, it is a gentle thing, beloved from pole to pole, to Mary Queen the praise be given. She sent the gentle sleep from heaven that slid into my soul. The silly buckets on the deck that had so long remained, I dreamt that they were filled with dew, and when I awoke, it rained. My lips were wet, my throat was cold, my garments were all dank. Sure, I had drunken in my dreams, and still my body drank. I moved and could not feel my limbs. I was so light, almost I thought that I had died in sleep, and was a blessed ghost. And soon I heard a roaring wind. It did not come anear, but with its sound it shook the sails that were so thin and sere. The upper air burst into life, and 100 fire flags sheen. To and fro they were hurried about, and to and fro and in and out the wan stars danced between. And the coming wind did roar more loud, and the sails did sigh like sedge. And the rain poured down from one black cloud. The moon was at its edge. The thick black cloud was cleft, and still the moon was at its side. Like waters shot from some high crag, the lightning fell with never a jag, a river steep and wide. The loud wind never reached the ship, yet now the ship moved. Beneath the lightning and the moon, the dead men gave a groan. They groaned, they stirred, they all uprose, nor spake, nor moved their eyes. It had been strange, even in a dream, to have seen those dead men rise. The helmsman steered, the ship moved on, yet never a breeze up blew. The mariners all gan work the ropes. Where they were wont to do, they raised their limbs like lifeless tools. We were a ghastly crew. The body of my brother's son stood by me, knee to knee. The body and I pulled at one rope, but he said not to me. I fear thee, ancient mariner, be calm, thou wedding guest. 'Twas not those souls that fled in pain, which to their corpses came again, but a troop of spirits blessed. For when it dawned, they dropped their arms and clustered round the mast. Sweet sounds rose slowly through their mouths, and from their bodies passed. Around and round flew each sweet sound, then darted to the sun. Slowly the sounds came back again, now mixed, now one by one. Sometimes a dropping from the sky, I heard the skylark sing. Sometimes all little birds that are, and how they seem to fill the sea and air with their sweet jargoning. Now 'twas like all instruments, now like a lonely flute, and now it is an angel's song that makes the heavens be mute. It ceased, yet still the sails made on, a pleasant noise till noon. A noise like of a hidden brook in the leafy month of June. That to the sleeping woods all night singeth a quiet tune. Till noon we quietly sailed on, yet never a breeze did breathe. Slowly and smoothly went the ship, moved onward from beneath. Under the keel 9 fathom deep, from the land of mist and snow, the spirit slid, and it was he that made the ship to go. The sails at noon left off their tune, and the ship stood still also. The sun, right up above the mast, had fixed her to the ocean, but in a minute she again stirred. With a short, uneasy motion, backwards and forwards half her length, with a short, uneasy motion. Then, like a pawing horse let go, she made a sudden bound. It flung the blood into my head, and I fell down in a swound. How long in that same fit I lay, I have not to declare. But ere my living life returned, I heard and in my soul discerned 2 voices in the air. Is it he, quoth one? Is it the man? By him who died on cross, with his cruel bow he laid full low the harmless albatross. The spirit who biddeth by himself in the land of mist and snow, he loved the bird that loved that man, who shot him with his bow. The other was a softer voice, as soft as honey dew. Quoth he, the man hath penance done. penance done, and penance more will do. Part 6. First voice. But tell me, speak again, thy soft response renewing. What makes that ship drive on so fast? What is the ocean doing? Second voice. Still is a slave before his lord. The ocean hath no blast. His great bright eye, mostly silent, up to the moon is cast. If he may know which way to go, for she guides him smooth or grim, see, brother, see, how graciously she looketh down on him. First voice. But why drives on that ship so fast, without or wave or wind? Second voice. The air is cut before, and closes from behind. Fly, brother, fly, more high, or we shall be belated, for slow and slow that ship will go, when the mariner's trance is abated. I woke, and we were sailing on, as a gentle weather. 'Twas night, calm night, the moon was high, the dead men stood together. All stood together on the deck, for a charnel dungeon fitter. All fixed on me their stony eyes, that in the moon did glitter. The pang, the curse, with which they died, had never passed away. I could not draw my eyes from theirs, nor turn them up to pray. And now this spell was snapped. Once more I viewed the ocean green, and looked far forth, yet little saw of what else had been seen. Like one that on a lonesome road doth walk in fear and dread, and having once turned round walks on, and turns no more his head, because he knows a frightful fiend doth close behind him tread. But soon there breathed a wind on me, nor sound nor motion made. Its path was not upon the sea, in a ripple or in shade. It raised my hair, it fanned my cheek, like a meadow gale of spring. It mingled strangely with my fears, yet it felt like a welcoming. Swiftly flew the ship, yet she sailed softly too. Sweetly blew the breeze. On me alone it blew. Oh, dream of joy, is this indeed? The lighthouse top I see. Is this the hill? Is this the kirk? Is this mine own country? We drifted over the harbor bar, and I with sobs did pray, or let me awake, my God, or let me sleep away. The harbor bay was clear as glass, so smoothly it was strewn, and on the bay the moonlight lay, and the shadow of the moon. The rock shone bright, the kirk no less, that stands above the rock, the moonlight steeped in silentness, the steady weathercock. And the bay was white with silent light, till rising from the same, full many shapes, that shadows were, in crimson colors came. A little distance from the prow, those crimson shadows were. I turned my eyes upon the deck. Oh Christ, what saw I there? Each corpse lay flat, lifeless and flat, and by the holy rood, a man all light, a seraph man, on every corpse there stood. This seraph band, each waved his hand. It was a heavenly sight. They stood as signals to the land, each one a lovely light. This seraph band, Each waved his hand, no voice did they impart, no voice, but oh, the silence sank like music upon my heart. But soon I heard the dash of oars, I heard the pilot's cheer. My head was turned perforce away, and I saw a boat appear. The pilot and the pilot's boy, I heard them coming fast. Dear Lord in heaven, it was a joy the dead men could not blast. I saw a third, I heard his voice, it is the hermit good. He singeth loud his godly hymns that he makes in the wood. He'll shrieve my soul, he'll wash away the albatross's blood. Part 7. This hermit good lives in that wood, which slopes down to the sea. How loudly his sweet voice he rears. He loves to talk with mariners that come from a far country. He kneels at morn, and noon, and eve. He hath a cushion plump. It is the moss that wholly hides the rotted old oak stump. The skiff boat neared, I heard them talk. Why, this is strange, I trow. Where are those lights, so many and fair, that signal made but now? Strange, but by my faith, the hermit said, and they answered not our cheer. The planks looked warped, and see those sails, how thin they are and sere. I never saw aught like to them, unless perchance it were brown skeletons of leaves that lag my forest brook along, when the ivy tod is heavy with snow, and the owlet whoops to the wolf below. Whoops to the wolf below. That eats the she-wolf's young. Dear Lord, it hath a fiendish look, the pilot made reply. I am afeard. Push on, said the hermit cheerily. The boat came closer to the ship, but I nor spake nor stirred. The boat came close beneath the ship, and straight a sound was heard. Under the water it rumbled on, still louder and more dread. It reached the ship, it split the bay, the ship went down like lead. Stunned by that loud and dreadful sound, which sky and ocean smote, like one that hath been 7 days drowned, and my body lay afloat. But swift as dreams, myself I found within the pilot's boat. Upon the whirl where sank the ship, the boat spun round and round, and all was still, save that the hill was telling of the sound. I moved my lips, the pilot shrieked, and fell down in a fit. The holy hermit raised his eyes, and prayed where he did sit. I took the oars, the pilot's boy, who now doth crazy go, laughed loud and long, and all the while his eyes went to and fro. Ha ha, quoth he, full plain I see, the devil knows how to row. And now all in my country I stood on the firm land. The hermit stepped forth from the boat, and scarcely he could stand. Oh, shrieve me, holy man, the hermit crossed his brow. Say quick, quoth he, I bid thee say, what manner of man art thou? Forthwith this frame of mine was wretched, with woeful agony, which forced me to begin my tale, and then it left me free. Since then, at an uncertain hour, that agony returns, and till my ghastly tale is told, this heart within me burns. I pass like night from land to land. I have strange powers of speech. In that moment that his face I see, I know the man must hear me. To him my tale I teach. What loud uproar burst from that door? The wedding guests are there, but in the garden bower, the bride and the bridesmaids singing are. And hark, the little vesper bell, which biddeth me to prayer. O wedding guests, this soul hath been alone on a wide, wide sea. So lonely 'twas that God himself scarce seemed there to be. O sweeter than the marriage feast, 'tis sweeter far to me, to walk together to the kirk with a goodly company. To walk together to the kirk, and all together pray, while each to his great Father bends, old men and babes and loving friends, and youths and maidens gay. Farewell, farewell, but this I tell to thee, thou wedding guest, he prayeth well who loveth well, both man and bird and beast. He prayeth best who loveth best, all things both great and small, for the dear God who loveth us, he made and loveth all. The mariner whose eye is bright, whose beard with age is hoar, is hoar, is gone. And now the wedding guest turned from the bridegroom's door. He went like one that hath been stunned, and is of sense forlorn, a sadder and wiser man. He rose, the morrow morn. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. He's like a terrible Jack Sparrow. And the lesson is, don't shoot birds when you're on a boat. And why do you not want to shoot birds? Because if there are birds, you must be close to land. And, that the lesson is to appreciate all forms of life and the birds and the beasts and the little rivers and all that stuff. But also, if you have birds near your boat, you probably at least won't get lost at sea. Because birds need land. And also there's the lovely meaning of like the albatross, and an albatross is a thing that gets put around your neck. Yeah, that's why birds are considered a good omen, because birds need land. They mean land. That land is nearby. But an albatross specifically is something that is put around your neck and drags you down. So that's, I don't know specifically that this is what that comes from. I think maybe it's older than that, and this is just using that like symbolism. But he shoots the albatross, and because he shoots the albatross, he gets like lost at sea, and nearly dies, and all of his crew die, and he has to live with that. So he tells everyone he meets this story. So yeah, it's a great poem. Thank you, Jotun Red Wolf, for well, suggesting, but like kind of requesting it. That was a really great poem to read. Water. Water. Yeah, it's a really great poem. I really like it. Let's see. What else? What else can we read? I don't really want to read pulp. Pulp. Ugh. But there are a ton of really great poets in the 18th century. The best 18th century poems everyone should read. Okay, let's see what's on this list. Shall we? Rape of the Lock, Alexander Pope. Yes. Oh, Lady Mary Wortley Montague, Hymn to the Moon. Yes, that's that's a really great poem. Thomas Gray Elegy, written in a country churchyard. That's a really good one. The Tiger, Tintern Abbey. Yeah. What's the really famous yes, this one. Oh, that may actually not be. Yeah, that's not public domain. Never mind. I was gonna say we could read "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night," but that was apparently written in 1953. That doesn't sound right. Dylan Thomas. When was Dylan Thomas? Welsh poets. Yeah, okay. I thought that was much older than it actually is. That's interesting. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Jonas Drake. All good here. Okay. What else can we read? Can't do Dylan Thomas. Any other requests? Or we can do some. I can pick one of my books. I think let's pick one of my books. Pick something from there. Where did you go? Okay. obviously, we should read Dracula by Bram Stoker. Let me first switch up my title a little bit so that we can let people know what we're doing. Oh, hey, we have... I just noticed that we have 69 followers. Nice. Hold on just a second. How do I... There. Channel... How do I... Yes. Dracula. Part 1. Okay. Now we should be good. Okay. Probably read a couple chapters and then see what happens. Okay. Dracula by Bram Stoker. To my dear friend, Hommybag. Who the heck is Hommybag? No idea. Chapter 1. Jonathan Harker's journal, kept in shorthand. 3 May, Bistritz. Left Munich at 8:35 p.m. on 1st May, arriving at Vienna early next morning. Should have arrived at 6:46, but train was an hour late. Budapest seems a wonderful place, from the glimpse which I got from it, from the train, and the little I could walk through the streets. I feared to go very very far from the station, as we arrived late and would start near the correct time as possible. The impression I had was that we were leaving from the west and entering the east, the most western of splendid bridges over the Danube, which is here of noble width and depth, took us among the traditions of Turkish rule. We left in pretty good time, and came after nightfall to Klausenburg. Here I stopped for the night at the Hotel Royal. I had for dinner, or rather supper, a chicken done up some way with red pepper, which was very good but thirsty. Memo, get recipe for Mina. I asked the waiter, and he said it was called paprika Händel, and that it was a national dish. I should be able to get it anywhere along the Carpathians. I found my smattering of German very useful here. Indeed, I don't know how I should be able to get on without it. Having had some time at my disposal when in London, I had visited the British Museum and made search among the books and maps in the library regarding Transylvania. It had struck me that some foreknowledge of the country could hardly fail to have some importance in dealing with a nobleman of that country. I find that the district he named is in the extreme east of the country, just on the borders of the three states: Transylvania, Moldavia, and Bukovia. In the midst of the Carpathian Mountains, one of the wildest and least known portions of Europe. I was not able to light on any map or work given the exact locality of Castle Dracula, as there are no maps of this country as yet to compare with our own Ordnance Survey maps. But I found that Bistritz, the post town named by Count Dracula, is a fairly well-known place. I shall enter here some of my notes, as they may refresh my memory when I talk over my travels with Mia. In the population of Transylvania, there are 4 distinct nationalities: Saxons in the south, and mixed with them the Wallachs, who are the descendants of the Dacians, Magyars in the west, and Slavskis, in the east and north. I am going among the latter, who claim to be the descendant from Attila and the Huns. They may be so, for when the Magyars conquered the country in the 11th century, they found the Huns settled in it. I read that every known superstition in the world is gathered into the horseshoe of the Carpathians, as if it were the center of some sort of imaginative whirlpool. If so, my stay may be very interesting. Memo: I must ask the Count all about them. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Wix, EXE. That's very kind of you. We're just reading a bit of Dracula. I had to hurry breakfast, for the train started a little before 8, or rather it ought to have done so. For after the rushing to the station at 7:30, I had to sit in the carriage for more than an hour before we began to move. It seems to me that the further east you go, the more unpunctual are the trains. What ought they to be in China? All day long we seemed to dawdle through a country which was full of beauty of every kind. Sometimes we saw little missiles. We saw little towns or castles on the top of steep hills, such as we see in old missals. Sometimes we ran by rivers and streams, which seemed, from the wide stony margin on each side of them, to be the subject to great floods. It takes a lot of water and running strong to sweep the outside edge of a river clear. At every station there were groups of people, sometimes crowds, and in all sorts of attire. Some of them were just like the peasants at home, or those I saw coming through France and Germany, with short jackets and round hats and homemade trousers, but others were very picturesque. The women looked pretty, except when you got near them, but They were very clumsy about the waist. They had all full white sleeves of some kind or other, and the most of them had big belts with a lot of strips of something fluttering from them like the dresses in a ballet. But of course, there were petticoats under them. The strangest figures we saw were the Slavics, who were more barbarian than the rest, with their their big cowboy hats, great baggy, dirty white trousers, white linen shirts, and enormous brass nails. They wore high boots with their trousers tucked into them, and had long black hair and heavy black mustaches. They are very picturesque, but do not look prepossessing. On the stage, they would be set down at once as some old Oriental band of brigands. They are, however, I am told, very harmless and rather wanting in natural self-assertion. By the way, I should say this. When reading older, especially British works, you have to keep in mind that the authors are really problematically racist. So keep that in mind. It was on the dark side of twilight when we got to the town, which is an interesting old place, being practically on the frontier. For the Borgo Pass leads from it into Bukovina. It has a very stormy existence, and it certainly shows marks of it. 50 years ago, a series of great fires took place, which made terrible havoc on 5 separate occasions. At the very beginning of the 17th century, it underwent a siege of 3 weeks and lost 13,000 people, the casualties of war proper being assisted by famine and disease. Count Dracula had directed me to go to the Golden Crone Hotel, which I found, to my great delight, to be thoroughly old-fashioned, for of course I wanted to see all that I could of the ways of the country. I was evidently expected, for when I got near the door I faced a cheery-looking elderly woman in the usual peasant dress, white undergarment with a long double apron, front and back, of colored stuff fitting almost too tight for modesty. When I came close, she bowed and said, "They're Englishmen." "Yes," I said, "Jonathan Harker." She smiled and gave some message to an elderly man in a white shirt sleeves who had followed her to the door. He went, but immediately returned with a letter. "My friend, welcome to the Carpathians. I am anxiously expecting you. Sleep well tonight. At 3 tomorrow, the diligence will start for Bukovina. A place on it is kept for you. At the Borgo Pass, my carriage will await you and will bring you to me. I trust that your journey from London has been a happy one, and that you will enjoy your stay in my beautiful land. Your friend, Dracula." Thank you, yeah. It's, it is what it is. For May. I found that my landlord had got a letter from the Count, directing him to secure the best place on the coach for me. But on making inquiries as to details, he seemed somewhat reticent. and pretended that he could not understand my German. This could not be true, because up to then he had understood it perfectly. At least, he answered my questions exactly as if he did. He and his wife, the old lady who had received me, looked at each other in a frightened sort of way. He mumbled that the money had been sent in a letter, and that was all he knew. When I asked him if he knew Count Dracula, and he could tell me anything of his castle, both he and his wife crossed themselves, and saying that they knew nothing at all, simply refused to speak further. It was so near the time of starting that I had no time to ask anyone else, for it was all very mysterious and not by any means comforting. Just before I was leaving, the old lady came up to my room and said in a very hysterical way, "Must you go? Oh, young Herr, must you go?" She was in such an excited state that she seemed to have lost her grip of what German she knew, and mixed it all up with some other language which I did not know at all. I was just able to follow her by asking many questions. When I told her that I must go at once, and that I was engaged on important business, she asked again, "Do you know what day it is?" I answered that it was the 4th of May. She shook her head as she said again, "Oh yes, I know that, but do you know what day it is?" On my saying that I did not understand, she went on, "It is the eve of St. George's Day. Do you not know that tonight, when the clock strikes midnight, all the evil things of the world will have full sway? Do you know where you are going, and what you are going to?" She was in such evident distress that I tried to comfort her, but without effect. Finally, she went down on her knees and implored me not to go, at least to wait a day or two before starting. It was all very ridiculous, but I did not feel comfortable. However, there was business to be done, and I could allow nothing to interfere with it. I therefore tried to raise her up, and said as gravely as I could that I thanked her, but my duty was imperative, and that I must go. She then rose and dried her eyes, and, taking a crucifix from her neck, offered it to me. I did not know what to do. As an English churchman, I have been taught to regard such things as in some measure idolatrous, and yet it seemed so ungracious to refuse an old lady meaning so well, that in such a state, she saw, I suppose, the doubt in my face, for she put the rosary around my neck, and said, "For your mother's sake," and went out of the room. I am writing up this part of the diary whilst I am waiting for the coach, which is, of course, late, and the crucifix is still around my neck. Whether it is the old lady's fear, or the many ghostly traditions of this place, or the crucifix itself, I do not know, but I am not feeling nearly as easy in my mind as usual. If this book should ever reach Mina before I do, let it bring my goodbye. Here comes the coach. 5 May. The Castle. The grey of the morning has passed, and the sun is high over the distant horizon, which seems jagged. Whether the trees or hills I know not, for it is so far off that big things are little and little are mixed. I am not sleepy, and as I am not to be called till I awake, naturally I write till sleep comes. There are many odd things to put down, and lest who reads them may fancy that I dined too well before I left Bistritz, let me put down my dinner exactly. I dined on what they called robber steak, bits of bacon, onion, and beef, seasoned with red pepper and strung on sticks, and roasted over the fire, in the simple style of a London's cat meat of the London cat's meat. The wine was golden medius, which produces a queer sting on the tongue, which is, however, not disagreeable. I had only a couple of glasses of this and nothing else. When I got on the coach, the driver had not taken his seat, and I saw him talking with the landlady. They were evidently talking of me, for every now and then they looked at me, and some of the people who were sitting on the bench outside the door, which they called by a name meaning word-bearer, came and listened, and then looked at me, most of them pityingly. I could hear a lot of words often repeated, queer words, for there were many nationalities in the crowd, so I quietly got my polyglot dictionary from my bag and looked them out. I must say they were not cheering to me, for amongst them were Ogdog, Satan, Pokal, Hell, Stegoka, Witch, Vrolk, and Vlokslok. I am sorry, Eastern Europeans, I am butchering your language. I am very sorry. Both of which mean the same thing, one being Slavic and the other Servian, for something that is either werewolf or vampire. Memo. I must ask the Count about these superstitions. When we started, the crowd round the inn door, which had by this time swelled to a considerable size, all made the sign of the cross and pointed 2 fingers towards me. With some difficulty, I got a fellow passenger to tell me what that meant. He would not say it. He would not answer at first, but on learning that I was English, he explained that it was a charm or a guard against the evil eye. This was not very pleasant for me, for starting for an unknown place to meet an unknown man, but everyone seemed so kind-hearted and so sorrowful and so sympathetic that I could not but be touched. I shall never forget the last glimpse which I had of the inn-yard, and its crowd of picturesque figures, all crossing themselves, as they stood round the wide archway, which its background of rich foliage and oleander, and orange trees in green tubs, clustered in the center of the yard. Then our driver, whose wide linen drawers covered the whole front of the box seat, Gosta, they called them, cracked his big whip over his 4 small horses, which ran abreast, and we set off on our journey. I soon lost sight and recollection of ghostly fears in the beauty of the scene as we drove along. Although had I known the language, or rather languages, which my fellow passengers were speaking, I might not have been able to throw them off so easily. Before us lay a green sloping land full of forests and woods, with here and there steep hills, crowned with clumps of trees or with farmhouses. The blank gable end to the road. There was everywhere a bewildering mass of fruit blossom, apple, plum, pear, cherry. And as we drove by, I could see the green grass under the trees spangled with the fallen petals. In and out amongst these green hills of what they called here the Middle Country, the Middle Land, ran the road, losing itself as it swept round the woods at the grassy curve, or was shut out by the straggling ends of pine woods, which here and there ran down the hillsides like tongues of flame. The road was rugged, but still we seemed to fly over it with a feverish haste. I could not understand then what the haste meant, but the driver was evidently bent on losing no time in reaching Borgo Prond. I was told that this road is in summertime excellent, but that it had not yet been put in order after the winter snows. It is, in this respect, it is different from the general run of roads in the Carpathians, for it is an old tradition that they are not to be kept in too good order. Of old, the Hofspaders would not repair them, lest the Turks should think that they were repairing to bring in foreign troops, and so hasten the war which was always really at loading point. Beyond the green swelling hills of the Middle Land rose mighty slopes of forest up to the lofty steeps of the Carpathians themselves. Right and left of us they towered, with the afternoon sun falling full upon them, and bringing out all the glorious colors of this beautiful range, deep blue and purple in the shadow of the peaks, green and brown where grass and rock mingled, and an endless perspective of jagged rock and pointed crags, till these themselves lost in the distance, where the snowy peaks rose grandly. Here and there seemed mighty rifts in the mountains, through which, as the sun began to sink, we saw now and again the white gleam of falling water. One of my companions touched my arm as we swept round the base of a hill and opened up a lofty snow-covered peak of a mountain, which seemed, as we wound on our serpentine way, to be right before us. "Look, ist den Steck, God's seat," and he crossed himself reverently. As we round on our endless way, and the sun sank lower and lower behind us, the shadows of the evening began to creep round us. This was emphasized by the fact that the snowy mountaintop still held the sunset, and seemed to glow, out with a delicate, cool pink. Here and there we passed Czechs and Slavics, all in picturesque attire, but I noticed that Goltra was painfully prevalent. But by the roadside were many crosses, and as we swept by, my companions all crossed themselves. Here and there was a peasant man or woman kneeling before a shrine, who did not even turn round as we approached, but seemed in the self-surrender of devotion to have neither eyes nor ears for the outer world. There were many things new to me. For instance, hayricks in the trees, here and there the very beautiful masses of weeping birch, their white stems shining like silver through the delicate green of leaves. Now and again we passed a lighter wagon, the ordinary peasant's cart, with its long snake-like vertebra calculated to suit the inequalities of the road. On this were sure to be seated a quiet group of homecoming peasants, the Czechs, with their white, and the Slavics with their colored sheepskins, the latter carrying lance-fashioned their long staves with axe at the end. As the evening fell, it began to get very cold, and the growing twilight seemed to merge into one dark mistiness. The gloom of the trees, oak, beech, and pine, though in the valleys which ran deep between the spurs of the hills, as we ascended through the pass, the dark firs stood out here and there against the background of late-lying snow. Sometimes, as the road was cut through the pine woods that seemed in the darkness to be closing down upon us, great masses of grayness, which here and there bestrewed the trees, produced a peculiarly weird and solemn effect, which carried on the thoughts and grim fancies engendered earlier in the evening. When the falling sunset threw into strange relief the ghost-like clouds, which amongst the Carpathians seemed to wind ceaselessly through the valleys. Sometimes the hills were so steep that, despite our driver's haste, the horses could only go slowly. I wished to get down and walk up them, as we do at home, but the driver would not hear of it. "No, no," he said, "you must not walk here. The dogs are too fierce." And then he added, with what he evidently meant for grim pleasantry, for he looked round to catch the approving smile of the rest, "And you may have enough of such matters before you go to sleep." The only stop he would make was a moment's pause to light his lamps. When it grew dark, there seemed to be some excitement among the passengers, and they kept speaking to him, one after the other, as though urging him to further speed. He lashed the horses unmercifully with his long whip, and with wild cries of encouragement urged them on to further exertions. Then through the darkness I could see a sort of patch of grey light ahead of us, as though there were a cleft in the hills. The excitement of the passengers grew greater. The crazy coach rocked on its great leather springs and swayed like a boat tossed on a stormy sea. I had to hold on. The road grew more level, and we appeared to fly along. The mountains seemed to come nearer to us on each side, and to frown down upon us. We were entering the Borgo Pass. One by one, several of the passengers offered me gifts, which they pressed upon me with an earnestness which would take no denial. These were certainly of an odd and varied kind, but each was given in simple good faith, with a kindly word and a blessing, and that strange mixture of fear-meaning movements which I had seen at the hotel. The sign of the cross and the guard against the evil eye. Then, as we flew along, the driver leaned forward, and on each side the passengers, craning over the edge of the coach, peered eagerly into the darkness. It was evident that something very exciting was either happening or expected. But though I asked each passenger, no one would give me the slightest explanation. This state of excitement kept on for some little time, and at last we saw before us the pass opening out and on the eastern side. There were dark rolling clouds overhead, and in the air the heavy, oppressive sense of thunder. It seemed as though the mountain range had separated two atmospheres, and that now we had gotten into the thunderous one. I was now myself looking out for the conveyance which was to take me to the Count. Each moment I expected to see the glare of lamps through the blackness, but all was dark. The only light was the flickering rays of our own lamps, in which the steam from our hard-driven horses rose in a white cloud. We could see now the sandy road lying white before us, but there was on it no sign of a vehicle. The passengers drove back with a sigh of gladness, which seemed to mock my own disappointment. I was already thinking what I had best do when the driver, looking at his watch, said to the others something which I could hardly hear. It was spoken so quietly and in so low a tone. I thought it was an hour less than the time. Then, turning to me, he said in German worse than my own, "There is no carriage here. The Herr is not expected after all. He will now come on to Bukovina, and return tomorrow or the next day, better the next day." Whilst he was speaking, the horses began to neigh and snort and plunge wildly, so the driver had to hold them. Then, amongst a chorus of screams from the peasants and a universal crossing of themselves, a calichet with 4 horses drove up behind us, overtook us, and drew up beside the coach. I could see from the flash of our lamps, as the rays fell upon them, that the horses were coal-black and splendid animals. They were driven by a tall man with long brown hair and a black hat, which seemed to hide his face from us. I could only see the gleam of a pair of very bright eyes, which seemed red in the lamplight, as he turned to us. He said to the driver, "You are early tonight, my friend." The man stammered in reply, "The English heir was in a hurry." To which the stranger replied, "That is why, I suppose, you wished him to go on to Bukovina. You cannot deceive me, my friend. I know too much, and my horses are swift." As he spoke, he smiled, and lamplight fell on a hard-looking mouth with very red lips and sharp-looking teeth as white as ivory. One of my companions whispered to another the line from Burger's Lenore, "Den die Toden retten schnell," for the dead travel fast. The strange driver evidently heard the words, for he looked up with a gleaming smile. The passenger turned his face away at the same time, putting out his 2 fingers and crossing himself. "Give me the Herr's luggage," said the driver, and exceeding alacrity, my bags were handed out and put in the calichet. Then I descended from the side of the coach, as the calichet was close alongside, the driver helping me with a hand which caught my arm in a grip of steel. His strength must have been prodigious. Without a word, he shook the reins, the horses turned, and we swept into the darkness of the pass. As I looked back, I saw the steam from the horses of the coach by the light of the lamps, and projected it against the figures of my late companions crossing themselves. Then the driver cracked his whip and called to his horses, and off they swept on their way to Bukovina. As they sank into the darkness, I felt a strange chill, and a lonely feeling came over me. But a cloak was thrown over my shoulders, and a rug across my knees. And the driver said in excellent German, "The night is chill, mein Herr, and my master the Count bade me take all care of you. There is a flask of Slivovitz, the plum brandy of the country, underneath the seat. if you should require it. I did not take any, but it was a comfort to know that it was there all the same. I felt a little strangely and a little frightened. I think that there had been any alternative, I should have taken it, instead of prosecuting that unknown night journey. The carriage went at a hard pace straight along. Then we made a complete turn and went along another straight road. It seemed to me that we were simply going over and over the same ground again, and so I took note of some salient point, and found that this was so. I would have liked to have asked the driver what this all meant, but I really feared to do so, for I thought that, placed as I was, any protest would have no effect in case there had been any intention to delay. By and by, however, I was curious to how time was passing. I struck a match, and by its flame looked at my watch. It was within minutes of midnight. This gave me a sort of shock, for I supposed the general superstition that about midnight was increased by my recent experiences. I waited with a sick feeling of suspense. Then a dog began to howl somewhere in a farmhouse, farther down the road, a long, agonized wailing as if from fear. The sound was taken up by another dog, and then another and another, till, borne on the wind which now sighed softly through the pass, a wild howling began, which seemed to come from all over the country, as far as the imagination could grasp it through the gloom of the night. At the first howl, the horses began to strain and rear, but the driver spoke to them softly, and they quieted down, but shivered and sweated, as though after a run away from sudden fright. Then, far off in the distance, from the mountains on each side of us, began a louder and sharper howling, that of wolves, which affected both the horses and myself in the same way, for I was minded to jump from the carriage and run, whilst they reared again and plunged madly, so that the driver had to use all his great strength to keep them from bolting. In a few minutes, however, my own ears got accustomed to the sound, and the horses so far became quiet that the driver was able to descend and to stand before them. He petted and soothed them, and whispered something in their ears, as I have heard of horse tamers doing, and with extraordinary effect. For under his caresses, they became quite manageable again, though they still trembled. The driver again took his seat, and shaking his reins, started off at a great pace. This time, after going to the far side of the pass, he suddenly turned down a narrow roadway which ran sharply at the right. Soon we were hemmed in with trees, which in places arched and right over the roadway till we passed as though through a tunnel. And again great frowning rocks guarded us boldly on either side. Though we were in a shelter, we could hear the rising wind, for it moaned and whistled through the rocks, and the branches of the trees crashed together as we swept along. It grew colder and colder still, and fine, powdery snow began to fall, so that soon we and all around us were covered with a white blanket. The keen wind still carried the howling of the dogs, though this grew fainter as we went on our way. The baying of the wolves sounded nearer and nearer, as though they were closing round on us on every side. I grew dreadfully afraid, and the horses shared my fear. The driver, however, was not in the least disturbed. He kept turning his head to the left and right, but I could not see anything through the darkness. Suddenly, away on our left, I saw a faint flickering blue flame. The driver saw it at the same moment. He at once checked the horses and jumped to the ground, disappeared into the darkness. I did not know what to do, the less as the howling of the wolves grew closer. But while I wondered, the driver suddenly appeared again, and without a word, took his seat, and we resumed our journey. I think I must have fallen asleep and kept dreaming of the incident, for it seemed to be repeated endlessly. And now looking back, it is like a sort of nightmare. Once the flame appeared so near the road that even in the darkness around us, I could watch the driver's motions. He went rapidly to where the blue flame arose. It must have been very faint, for it did not seem to illuminate the place around it at all. But gathering a few stones formed into some device. Once there appeared a strange optical effect. When he stood between me and the flame, he did not obstruct it, for I could see its ghostly flicker all the same. This startled me, but as the effect was only momentary, I took it that my eyes deceived me, straining through the darkness. Then, for a time, there were no blue flames, and we sped onwards through the gloom, with the howling of the wolves all around us, as though they were following in a moving circle. At last there came a time when the driver went further afield than he had yet gone, and during his absence the horses began to tremble worse than ever, and to snort and scream with fright. I could not see any cause for it, for the howling of the wolves had ceased altogether. But just then the moon, sailing through the black clouds, appeared behind the jagged crest of a bleeding, pine-clad rock, and by its light I saw around us a ring of wolves, with white teeth and lolling red tongues, with long, sinewy limbs and shaggy hair. They were 100 times more terrible in the grim silence which held them than even when they howled. For myself, I felt a sort of paralysis of fear. It is only when a man feels himself face to face with such horrors that he can understand their true import. All at once, the wolves began to howl, as though the moonlight had had some peculiar effect on them. The horses jumped about and reared, and looked helplessly round with eyes that rolled in a way painful to see. But the living ring of terror encompassed them on every side, and they had perforce to remain within it. I called to the coachman to come, for it seemed to me that our only chance was to break out through the ring and to aid his approach. I shouted and beat the side of the calichet, hoping by the noise to scare the wolves from that side, so as to give him a chance of reaching the trap. How he came there I know not, but I heard his voice raised in a tone of imperious command, and looked towards the sound, saw him stand in the roadway, as he swept his long arms as though brushing aside some impalpable obstacle. The wolves fell back, and back further still. Just then a heavy cloud passed across the face of the moon, and so we were again in darkness. When I could see again, the driver was climbing into the calichet, and the wolves had disappeared. This was all so strange and uncanny that a dreadful fear came upon me, and I was afraid to speak or move. The time seemed interminable as we swept on our way, now in almost complete darkness, for the rolling clouds obscured the moon. We kept on ascending, with occasional periods of quick descent, but in the main always ascending. Suddenly, I became conscious of the fact that the driver was in the act of pulling up the horses in the courtyard of a vast ruined castle, from whose tall black windows came no ray of light, whose broken battlements showed a jagged line across the moonlit sky. That's the end of chapter 1. How are you doing, Island Penrose? I'm going to take a quick water break. Just a second. Chapter 2. Jonathan Harker's Journal, continued. 5 May. I must have been asleep, for certainly if I had been fully awake, I must have noticed the approach of such a remarkable place. In the gloom, the courtyard looked of considerable size, and as several dark ways led it from great round arches, it perhaps seemed bigger than it really is. I have not yet been able to see it by daylight. When the calash stopped, the driver jumped down and held out his hand to assist me to alight. Again, I could not but notice his prodigious strength. His hand actually seemed like a steel vice that could have crushed mine if he had chosen. Then he took out my traps and placed them on the ground beside me as I stood close to a great door, old and studded with large iron nails, and set in a projecting doorway of a massive stone. I could see even in the dim light that the stone was massively carved, but that the carving had been much worn by time and weather. As I stood, the driver jumped again into his seat and shook the reins. The horses started forward, and trap and all disappeared down one of the dark openings. I stood in silence where I was, for I did not know what to do. Of bell or knocker there was no sign, though these frowning walls and dark window openings, it was not likely that my voice could penetrate. The time I waited seemed endless, and I felt doubts and fears crowding upon me. What sort of place had I come to, and among what kind of people? What sort of grim adventure was it on which I had embarked? Was this a customary incident in the life of a solicitor's clerk, sent out to explain the purchase of a London estate to a foreigner? Solicitor's clerk. Mina would not like that. Solicitor. For just before leaving London, I got word that my examination was successful. and I am now a full-blown solicitor. I began to rub my eyes and pinch myself to see if I were awake. It all seemed like a horrible nightmare to me, and I expected that I should suddenly awake and find myself at home, with the dawn struggling in through the windows, as I had now and again felt in the morning after a day of overwork. But my flesh answered the pinching test, and my eyes were not to be deceived. I was indeed awake and among the Carpathians. All I could do now was to be patient and to wait the coming of the morning. Just as I had come to this conclusion, I heard a heavy step approaching behind the great door, and saw through the chinks through the chinks the gleam of a coming light. Then there was the sound of rattling chains, and the clanking of massive bolts drawn back. A key was turned with the loud grating noise of long disuse, and the great door swung back. Within stood a tall old man, clean-shaven, save for a long white mustache, and clad in black from head to foot, without a single speck of color about him anywhere. He held in his hand an antique silver lamp, in which the flame burned without chimney, globe of any kind, throwing long quivering shadows as it flickered in the draught of the open door. The old man motioned me in with his right hand with courtly gesture, saying in excellent English, with a strange intonation, "Welcome to my house. Enter freely, and of your own will." He made no motion of stepping to meet me, but stood like a statue, as though his gesture of welcome had fixed him into stone. The instant, however, that I had stepped over the threshold, he moved impulsively forward, holding out his hand, grasped mine with a strength which made me wince, an effect which was not lessened by the fact that it seemed as cold as ice, more like the hand of a dead than living man. Again he said, "Welcome to my house. Come freely, go safely, and leave something of the happiness you bring." The strength of the handshake was so much akin to that which I had noticed in the driver, whose face I had not seen, that for a moment I doubted if it were not the same person to whom I was speaking. To make sure, I said interrogatively, "Count Dracula?" He bowed in a courtly way as he replied, "I am Dracula, and I bid you welcome, Mr. Harker, to my house. Come in. The night air is chill, and you must need to eat and rest." As he was speaking, he put the lamp on a bracket on the wall, and stepping out, took my luggage. He had carried it in before I could forestall him. I protested, but he insisted. "Nay, sir, you are my guest. It is late, and my people are not available. Let me see to your comfort myself." He insisted on carrying my traps along the passage, and then up a great winding stair, and along another great passage, on whose stone floor our steps rang heavily. At the end of this he threw open a heavy door, and I rejoiced to see within a well-lit room, which a table was spread for supper, and on whose mighty hearth a great fire of logs freshly replenished flamed and flared. The Count halted, putting down my bags, closed the door, and crossing the room, opened another door, which led into a small octagonal room lit by a single lamp, and seemingly without a window of any sort. Passing through this, he opened another door, and motioned me to enter. It was a welcome sight, for here was a great bedroom, well lighted, and warmed with another log fire. Also added to, but lately, for the logs were fresh, which sent a hollow roar up the wide chimney. The Count himself left my luggage inside, and withdrew, saying before he closed the door, "You will need, after your journey, to refresh yourself by making your toilet. I trust you will find all you wish. When you are ready, come into the other room, where you will find your supper prepared." The light and warmth and the Count's courteous welcome seemed to have dissipated all my fears and doubts. Having then reached my normal state, I discovered that I was half famished with hunger. So, making a hasty toilet, I went into the other room. I found supper already laid out. My host, who stood on one side of the great fireplace, leaned against the stonework, made a graceful wave of his hand to the table, and said, "I pray you be seated and sup how you please. You will, I trust, excuse me that I do not join you, but I have dined already, and I do not sup." "That's 'cause you sup on human blood. Yummy." I handed to him the sealed letter, which Mr. Hawkins had entrusted to me. He opened it and read it gravely. Then, with a charming smile, he handed it to me to read. One passage of it, at least, gave me a thrill of pleasure. "I must regret that an attack of gout, from which malady I am a constant sufferer, forbids absolutely any traveling on my part for some time to come, but I am happy to say that I can send a sufficient substitute, one in whom I have every possible confidence. He is a young man full of energy and talent, in his own way, and of a very faithful disposition. He is discreet and silent, and has grown into manhood in my service. He shall be ready to attend on you when you will during his stay, and shall take your instructions in all matters." The Count himself came forward and took off the cover of a dish, and I fell to at once an excellent roast chicken. This, with some cheese and a salad, and a bottle of old Tokay, of which I had 2 glasses, was my supper. During the time I was eating, the Count asked me many questions as to my journey, and I told him by degrees all I had experienced. By this time I had finished my supper, and by my host's desire had drawn up a chair by the fire, and began to smoke a cigar which he offered me, at the same time excusing himself that he did not smoke. I had now an opportunity of observing him, and found him of a marked physiognomy. His face was strong, a very strong, aquiline, with high bridge of the thin nose, and peculiarly arched nostrils, with lofty domed forehead, and hair growing scantily round the temples, but profusely everywhere else. His eyebrows were very massive, almost meeting over the nose, and with a bushy hair and with bushy hair that seemed to curl in its own profusion. The mouth, so far as I could see, it under the heavy mustache, was fixed and rather cruel looking, with a peculiarly sharp white teeth, these protruding over the lips, whose remarkable ruddiness showed astonishing vitality in a man of his years. For the rest, his ears were pale and at the tops extremely pointed. The chin was broad and strong, and the cheeks firm though thin. The general effect was of extraordinary pallor. Hitherto I had noticed the backs of his hands as they lay on his knees in the firelight, and they seemed rather white and fine. But seeing them now close to me, I could not but notice that they were rather coarse. Broad with squat fingers. Strange to say that there were hairs in the center of the palm. The nails were long and fine, and cut to a sharp point. As the Count leaned over me, his hands touched mine. I could not... And his hand touched mine. I could not repress a shudder. It may have been that his breath was rank, but a horrible feeling of nausea came over me, which, do what I would, I could not conceal. The Count, evidently noticing it, drew back, and with a grim sort of smile, which showed more than he had yet done his protuberant teeth, sat himself down again on his own side of the fireplace. We were both silent for a while, and I looked towards the window, and as I looked towards the window, I saw the first dim streak of the coming dawn. There seemed a strange stillness over everything. But as I listened, I heard it as if from down in the valley, the howling of many wolves. The Count's eyes gleamed as he said, "Listen to them, the children of the night. What music they make." Seeing, I suppose, some expression on in my face strange to him, he added, "Ah, sir, you dwellers in the city cannot enter into the feelings of the hunter." And then he rose and said, "But you must be tired. Your bedroom is all ready, and tomorrow you shall sleep as late as you will. I have to be away till the afternoon, so sleep well and dream well." With a courteous bow, he opened for me himself the door to the octagonal room, and I entered my bedroom. I am all in a sea of wonders. I doubt, I fear, I think strange things, which I dare not confess to my own soul. God keep me, if only for the sake of those dear to me. Okay. I think that is a good point for me to stop for now. Because I've been reading for about a little under 2.5 hours, and my throat is getting a little scratchy. So, I think we're going to stop it there and resume at a later date. But thank you all for hanging out with me and chilling. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I love reading aloud. So yeah, I will see you later. I think I will try to find someone to raid. let's see. Who can we raid? Who can we raid? Oh, let's raid Lexicat. I'm really glad that you enjoyed the reading, Island. And thank you very much for coming. Raid. Warrior. Yeah, I don't know when. Yeah, I have a nice big bottle of water that I've been taking swings out of, but um, yeah, 2.5 hours is a good run. But yeah, I don't know exactly when I'm gonna do another reading stream. I like to mix it up with doing like gaming content and reading. But I'll definitely be doing another reading stream pretty soon. Um, so yeah, be on the lookout for that. And I will see you next time, hopefully. Let's start the raid. Okay. I will see you next time. Bye.